Hey everyone, welcome back to the 7th Generation Podcast and Dr. B Teaches. I'm really excited to be here with you today. As many of you know who've been following me, I love exploring issues related to history, sociology. I've been teaching sociology and Native American studies for over 20 years, and I really love diving into these topics. And so I wanted to do an entire episode dedicated to just kind of exploring Native American Heritage Month. And I released a video on my YouTube channel, Dr. B Teaches, just sharing 5 facts about Native American Heritage Month and some of the things that I feel like people should know, that everybody should know. And I thought I would do an expanded podcast episode on these facts that I shared in this short video and just kind of expand and talk a little bit more about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Native American Heritage Month and how we got here to this time when we have an actual month dedicated to just celebrating Indigenous cultures and the history and why I think it's important. And I also want to talk about the diversity of Native Americans as well, because Native Americans, it's really a category that is often misunderstood, because we're talking about literally hundreds of different communities with different languages, customs, histories, tribal ceremonies, and so on. And a lot of people just don't really understand just how diverse Native people are. So I want to talk about that and discuss land acknowledgments as well. If you don't know what a land acknowledgement is, I'll explain what it is and offer up a different perspective on land acknowledgments. And of course, thinking about Native American Heritage Month, I want us to know that it shouldn't just be about performative recognition, talking about Native Americans as if they're a culture that has disappeared. It's more than that. And so for me, this month is a chance just to be able to share what little knowledge that I have. I've been teaching and exploring tribal issues, sociological issues related to settler colonialism and so on for years, for a couple decades now. But I'm still learning, and just like everybody else, I don't know everything. There's no way to know everything about Indigenous communities, Indigenous cultures. But I think it's important for us to honor the resilience and the cultures, the contributions of Indigenous peoples, while at the same time confronting some of the challenges that Native Americans have today here in 2024. We can't just celebrate Indigenous cultures as if everything is just wonderful. And we're still living under settler colonial structures that really need to be interrogated and need to be dismantled. And so those are some of the things I want to talk about. So grab your coffee, tea, water, whatever keeps you going, and let's dive into some of these facts. Something that I didn't realize was that Native Americans have been fighting for some type of recognition by the federal government literally for decades, for well over 100 years. There's been Native activists going all the way back to 1915, like Dr. Arthur C. Parker of the Seneca Nation, and other leaders who were advocating for some kind of day that would recognize the contributions of Indigenous peoples. And finally, in 1916, the first American Indian Day was declared by the state of New York. So this struggle to get some kind of recognition, it's been ongoing for decades. So Native American Heritage Month just didn't happen overnight. And I think that's important to acknowledge that people have been fighting for some type of acknowledgement and to be able to celebrate the contributions, the history, the cultures of the First Nations peoples, but at the same time, talk about some of the challenges and the difficulties that Indigenous communities face. And so it's been a long time coming. For decades, activists have been, working hard to bring awareness, again, of the contributions, the struggles of indigenous communities. Finally, in 1990, President George Bush officially designated November as Native American Heritage Month. So it was officially dedicated to Native peoples, the month of November, going all the way back to 1990. And since that time, this has always been the month for Native Americans. Now, I've always complained a little bit about it because I felt like, we were given November because of Thanksgiving. That's when Thanksgiving is celebrated. And there, of course, there's that whole BS story about the Native Americans and the Pilgrims, the Indians and the Pilgrims. And we really don't learn much about who those Indians were and who the Pilgrims were. We just basically give this mythology. So, and of course, we kind of lose a week as well because most people just shut it down for that week and they just focus on family time. So we kind of lose a week during the month of November. Anyway, I've always thought that was kind of messed up, but nevertheless, November is dedicated to Native American Heritage Month. And it's a chance, again, for us to reflect on indigenous cultures, celebrate indigenous cultures, and to kind of see a little bit of the perspectives of indigenous peoples and to give people from those communities an opportunity to share, an opportunity for non-natives as well to listen. And I think that's important this time of the year as we're celebrating Native American Heritage Month. Non-natives need to talk less and listen more. And it's a chance for Native people to be able to talk about their culture, talk about their issues. And I think it's important for us to be open to that. So there's a lot of hard fought battles to get us to this point to where we would have a month of recognition. And I'm always excited in the month of November to be able to share with my students and also to bring people from the community to the campus where I work to give them an opportunity to share as well. And sometimes when we're sharing during this month, it's not always the things that non-natives want. I feel like sometimes non-natives, what they want from us is they want us to come in and to sing and to dance and to drum, but they don't really want much more than that. And I've always said, for me, Native American Heritage Month isn't just simply about recognizing the contributions of indigenous communities. It should be a time for Native people to come into spaces that they don't typically occupy, and it gives them a chance to be able to share and to talk about issues that are important to them. And if there's some dancing and some singing to go along with that, a drum group that comes in, that's great. But, Native people, we're not here to perform for you. So we need to remember that. We need to remember that. And I think it's important for us to reflect on the fact that it was really hard for all of us to make it this far. The government here in the United States, I know in Canada as well, really any settler colonial nation really did try to create a system of control, a system of genocide that would lead to our complete annihilation. And so it really is a miracle that Native communities are here today. And so we should definitely be diligent in reminding people of that fact. And we should have an opportunity to talk about some of that history in a good way and be able to, at the same time, interrogate those colonial structures that are still in place, because there's a lot of problems that need to be addressed, and some of these problems are systemic. And the only way that you can bring about good change is not only to be reflective on how we got here, but to look at the current structure and to see how it's not working for our communities. All right, so fact number 2, there's over 500 federally recognized tribes here in the United States, and there's literally dozens more that are fighting for recognition. I think there's 574 tribes that have federal acknowledgement. That's just in the United States, okay? So if you're talking about Canada, then we're talking about dozens and dozens of communities that have acknowledgement from the Canadian government. But here in the U.S., I know, especially in California, we have tribes that don't have recognition, and they're trying to get recognition. And there's some tribes that were terminated here. There was a congressional law that was passed back in the 1950s called the Termination Act, and they attempted to terminate the federal status of tribal nations, and I'm sure they would love to do that today. Some people in the government, I'm sure, would love to get out of the tribal business, if you will, and would love to end federal recognition. But what I really want to talk about is, what does federal recognition really mean to a tribe? Well, federal recognition means that a tribe has a government-to-government relationship with the United States, a nation-to-nation relationship. So when you think about Native Americans, you should think about people who are citizens of a different nation, of a different country, if you will. And this federal acknowledgement acknowledges that there are communities within the United States that aren't simply communities. These are nations that have their own set of laws, that have their own set of rules. In some cases, they have police forces, they have jails, and all the same types of institutions that we have in really in any society. So federal recognition means a lot. It really, really does mean a lot. There's a lot of benefits that Native people struggled and fought for and are still fighting for. And there's a lot of funding and programs that come from the federal government that are guaranteed in treaties. And so when the United States was attempting to basically remove Native Americans off the land, one of their tactics was to engage in treaty making with Native Americans and to create a reservation system that was really meant to do in and eliminate natives. There was this attitude that natives were a problem. And they were a problem because they occupied North America, and European settlers wanted to take the land. And so one of the solutions is basically to take Native Americans off the land, force them onto reservations. And part of that process was to, in some cases, strong arm tribal communities into signing treaties. Now, not all these treaties were bad in the sense that Native Americans were just completely taken advantage of. What I always try to tell people is Native people were very smart, very savvy. Native American leadership has a very powerful legacy. And there were a lot of leaders that were really adept at dealing with Europeans politically, and they worked really hard to get the best treaty possible. And some of these treaties were actually so well developed in favor of tribal communities that, of course, the federal government came along and broke them. Basically, every single treaty that was signed and ratified was broken. And there was over 371 treaties that were signed and ratified. And there were other treaties that were signed and they were never ratified by Congress just because people didn't believe that the treaty was in the best interest of settlers. So I know here in California, I think there were 18 treaties that were never ratified, that were supposed to guarantee some 7-8 million acres of land, and people are still fighting for their treaty rights even today. So, number one, tribes are engaged in a government-to-government relationship with the feds. Again, with the federal government, not with states. It's not that the states don't matter, but I don't want to complicate things too much. But it's a government-to-government relationship with the federal government. But there are tribes that don't have federal recognition. If you don't have federal recognition, you don't get access to federal funding that is meant to go to tribal communities. So you have to keep that in mind, that there are tribes that are fighting really hard today for federal recognition. I know the Ohlone in the Bay Area, there's a couple different Ohlone communities, but I know the one community there had a march recently all the way to Washington, D.C. It really turned out ugly. And I'd like to maybe do an episode on that situation in the future. So tribes are fighting for recognition. And I know there's a lot of people out there, even within the Native community, who are very critical of some of these tribes that are still working on federal recognition. But I know here in California, there are communities that have been in place since time immemorial that do not have federal acknowledgement, and they keep going as a community. And I have nothing but respect, nothing but support for those communities. And in my view, they deserve federal recognition if they want it. And like I said, every single tribe is unique. They have their own languages, traditions, governmental structures. Native Americans are incredibly vibrant, like I said, very, very diverse and powerful. And during Native American Heritage Month, it's really important for us to celebrate that diversity, acknowledge the struggles that some tribes face, and we should support one another as well, and come together to be able to share and to be able to talk about not just our culture and not just the good, but also maybe the not so good as well. But I think the most important thing that I would like people to get from learning anything about Native people is just how diverse Indigenous communities are. And this goes from everything to the foods that we ate, to the clothes that we wore, that we still wear today for ceremonies, and the religious ceremonies, our spiritual outlook. There are commonalities by all means. Of course there's commonalities, a lot of commonalities. But the way that Native culture plays out each and every day is different from community to community. All right, fact number 3, land acknowledgments matter, but not in the way that you think. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a land acknowledgement, but if you have, bear with me. If you haven't, I'll explain exactly what it is. So it's when someone recognizes the Indigenous peoples who are the original stewards of the land that they live on. For example, where I live and where I work, I always try to acknowledge the Yokuts and the Mono communities. Those are the tribes, the local tribes in this area. And I always try to acknowledge them. And just a simple acknowledgement is really all it takes. But they become more and more popular today. And I think they are important in the sense that they remind us that Native peoples are not a thing of the past, that they're still here. But I always try to emphasize that land acknowledgments alone are just simply not enough. And it becomes performative when somebody gives a speech and then they just simply do a land acknowledgement and then they move forward with whatever it is that they're talking about. And to me, that's not good enough. That's not going to fly. And I feel as though if you really want to pay your respects to tribal communities, invite the community to whatever event you're speaking at. Invite them to come and do some type of land acknowledgement. These land acknowledgements, at least back in the old days prior to the advent and the beginning of settler colonialism, land acknowledgements were a type of ceremony. It was a type of spiritual practice. And now we've turned it into performative activism. And I don't know, I'm not down with that. And if it's just a starting point and you do something else besides just simply mentioning the original people, then fine. And I think that's what we should be doing. Acknowledgement just simply isn't enough. And so you can support tribal communities by going to their events, first of all, and learning more about them, and then inviting them to your event so that way they can speak and they can talk a little bit about the land that we are all living on. And it doesn't matter where you live. You could be living on the East Coast, West Coast, North, South, East, West, whatever. You're living on Native land. And I think it's important for you not just simply to acknowledge that Native people were once there, but they are still here today. We're still here. We're still on the land, practicing our culture. And if you really want to do right by tribal communities, you need to open up a space for them to come and share. And that, to me, that's the right way to do it. I think that if you're just trying to be politically correct, or if you're just looking to just, I don't know, simply acknowledge the tribal communities, from my point of view, I don't think that that's enough. I think that all of us, all of you, we can do better. And acknowledgement is a starting point, but without action, that can feel really, really empty. So we need to do more than just simply acknowledge the First Nations. We need to educate ourselves on the history of the land. We need to educate ourselves on the consequences of settler colonialism as well. And I think if we do that, and then creating spaces for tribal communities to come in and be able to speak about these issues, and of course, listening and opening your mind, then yeah, that's, I think, heading in the right direction. If you don't do that, and you're just simply engaging in some type of I don't know, performative activism, then for me, like I said, personally, that really doesn't work. Fact number 4, Native Americans are not a thing of the past. This is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have, is that Native Americans are a relic of history. And nothing could be further from the truth. Indigenous peoples are alive today, thriving and contributing in pretty much every field, every aspect of our society. And you look at activism and the land back movement, MMIW, reclaiming stolen land, protecting sacred places, preserving the culture, language revitalization, social movements, like I said, the MMIW movement. There's just Native activism all around us. And it's not just here, it's also abroad. I mean, just seeing what the Maori are doing in New Zealand, Aotearoa, and, fighting to keep their treaty rights in place. It's super, super inspiring. And I think that we should all obviously respect and learn about the contributions of Native Americans, the historical contributions. But Native Americans are contributing here right now, today, here in 2024. And so, and it's not just activism. Natives are participating in the sciences. There's Native American artists, athletes, leaders that are shaping our future. And so in many cases, Native Americans aren't just surviving. Now, American society was set up to do in tribal communities, but tribal communities have fought to maintain their sovereignty, to maintain their culture. And I think it's important to recognize that not only have they been able to survive these horrible structures of settler colonialism, these terrible assimilation policies, but in some cases they've been able to thrive amid this chaotic Western world that we live in. And Native American Heritage Month is a time to celebrate not just, again, the contributions, but to acknowledge those challenges that we face today, And I think that that's one of the biggest struggles that so many people have when they think of Native Americans. They think of stereotypes, and they think of people from way back in the day who no longer exist. And one of the issues, I think, is the fact that Native American population is just so low. I mean, we're about 1 to 2% of the population here in the United States. I don't know what it is in Canada. I know that in South America, the Native population is much larger. But here in the United States, you might go your whole life and never even get to know or sit next to a Native American and learn from a Native American. I think that's one of the reasons why people, when they think of natives, they don't really think of somebody that they live next to or somebody that they could be friends with. But that's not the only reason why. The other reason why is the fact that government didn't want Native people around. Native people were in the way. They were in the way of manifest destiny. And there was just a clear attempt to completely eliminate Native people altogether. And in doing so, several stereotypes were created about Indigenous peoples. These stereotypes serve a purpose. The purpose is to dehumanize. You dehumanize, it's easier to eliminate. And we need to recognize that Native Americans have had their humanity stripped from them. And it's very, very difficult to get people to recognize, in some cases, not in all, but it's very difficult to get people to recognize that any person out there who is Native is just like any other person. They have feelings. They have aspirations and dreams. They want good things for their family. But yet, because of the dehumanization that has been taking place through endless stereotypes concerning tribal communities, when people think of Indigenous peoples, all they think about are the stereotypes. And I always try to remind people, look, Native people are here today. You're living on Native land, number one, and Native people still occupy that land. So let's not forget that. So, fact number 5, true allyship goes beyond representation. Let's talk about allyship. Native American Heritage Month isn't about sharing a meme or something that's stereotypical. It's really, truly about taking action. So when people ask me about being a good ally, what can I do? I always say start by supporting Native American communities in some way. Attend one of their community events. Support Native-owned businesses. Be an advocate for tribal sovereignty. That's probably the most important thing, is just learn about the trust relationship between the federal government here in the United States and tribal communities. So educate yourself about these issues like environmental justice, Indigenous rights, the fight to protect sacred lands. There's so many struggles that Indigenous communities have that people are not clued into because people aren't going beyond just the surface level information that we typically get during the month of November for Native American Heritage Month. But I encourage people to dig deeper, pick up a good book, and you could always leave a question in the comment section. If you want some titles, I can give you some titles. Pick up a good book during the month of November. Pick up 2 or 3. I can offer up some really great titles for you all to learn about. Whatever it is you want to learn about, let me know in the comment section, and I'll give you some titles. But yeah, support a Native-owned business. There's all kinds of businesses that I support. I like to wear T-shirts. I'm a T-shirt guy, and so I always support Native businesses like the Natives, Decolonial Clothing, and my good friend Douglas Miles. He puts out some dope T-shirts. So that's how I like to support my Native brothers and sisters, my Native relatives, is to buy their merch. But there's just so many different Native businesses out there that you can support, and tribal communities are always holding community events. When I mean by a community event, I mean a community event where everybody can come, whether it's a powwow or some other type of event. that Native people are holding. So one of the best ways to be an ally isn't to try to speak for Native people, is to allow them to speak for themselves, support their businesses, and again, be an advocate for tribal sovereignty, educate yourself. And to me, if you can, if you're in a position of power, do your best to amplify Native voices. And there's a lot of really amazing, brilliant tribal people out there. And, I always get asked to speak at events and whatnot. And I always tell people, man, there's so many other people out there. I'm getting old and I don't even want to speak at events anymore. There's so many amazing people out there that are just so much more schooled and up on issues than I am today. And man, I feel like we need to give them an opportunity. So if you have a chance to bring somebody in to an event that you're doing to talk about tribal communities, I think that's a really great way to be a good ally. And that just goes far beyond recognition. Because honestly, I don't give a what about recognition. I truly, truly don't. I don't think recognition is all that important. I think protecting treaty rights is important. Protecting tribal sovereignty is important. Ending the MMIW crisis and protecting sacred sites. Those are the things that I feel are most important. Representation, just that alone doesn't cut it. So again, one of the best ways you can be an ally is listen, learn, educate yourself. Ask yourself, what am I doing to support Native communities? Are you doing anything? Are you not doing anything? And allyship isn't a one-time thing. It's a commitment as well. So get out there, educate yourself. I mean, that's what I do each and every day. I try my best to educate myself. I see myself as a lifelong learner, and that's how you need to see yourself. And so there's all kinds of communities that I don't know enough about. And the only way for me to learn is to be able to open my mind and open my heart and be willing to listen. And if you're able to do that, you're going to be such a better human being, and you'll be able to do more to help as well. All right, so there you have it. Those are 5 facts about Native American Heritage Month that I wanted to share. This month, again, it's more than just recognition. It's about education, action, honoring the resilience of Indigenous communities. I know that's an overused word, is resilience, and I hope we get to the point in time where we don't have to be so damn resilient all the time, and where we can just enjoy our lives and just be human beings, like it was back in the old days before these colonial structures came along and created so much chaos, not just for tribal communities, but chaos for everybody, because we're all living in this world together, this capitalistic, schizophrenic world where there's just so much confusion, so much division. And something that I enjoy doing is being able to kind of unpack all that, to kind of make sense out of it, so that way I can educate myself about how I can do better, and I can educate others if possible. And I think today, in this episode, and this month, it's just a chance for us just to be able to share and to be able to reflect as well, and to see how we can do better. So if you learned something new, please share the episode with someone else. Feel free to send it out. Don't forget to subscribe to Dr. B Teaches on my YouTube channel. You can check me out on Instagram. I try to post a lot of content on Instagram, on my TikTok, which is Merciless Savages. So if you're on TikTok, you can follow me. My handle is Merciless Savages, and my Instagram is 7Gen Podcast. That's my handle. And then, of course, YouTube, Dr. B Teaches. And you can find the 7 Generation Podcast on Spotify and all major platforms. Just type in 7 Generation Podcast. So I really appreciate you all. Thank you for tuning in to the podcast and Dr. B Teaches. I love podcasting. I love sharing. And I wish I had more time to do this. I wish I could do it full time, but I have a full-time job, and I also run 7 Generation Jiu-Jitsu as well. And so I definitely am very, very busy, and but every time I have a chance to do this, I really have a great time. So I encourage you all to stay informed, stay connected, and remember, Native peoples are still here, thriving, resisting, and you live on Native land. Wherever you are here on Turtle Island, United States, Canada, south of the border, it's all Native land. Till next time, this is Dr. B. I'm out.